Good morning, church. 366 days ago, 32-year-old Heather Heyer was murdered in a rally where she and others stood against white nationalists in Charlottesville, Virginia. And it was at her memorial service that Jody and I were given a purple cloth. It reminds me of Heather's famous quote, "If you are not outraged, you are not paying attention." She had the courage and determination to give voice for the voiceless. 1 second, Heather was alive and strong, and in the next tick of the clock, her breath was taken away. For you see, life is fragile. There is a thin veil between life and death, isn't there? As we conclude our series on When God Bends the Rules, based here on the book of Ruth, the story moved quickly from famine to funerals in a foreign land, all in the first 5 verses. Naomi's husband dies in verse 3, and then after her 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, marry Moabite foreign women while they are in Moab, 10 years later they die in verse 5 of chapter 1. Fragileness. Fragile comes from the Latin word fragile, which means to break. Bones break. Sometimes our minds snap. Relationships can rip our hearts apart because life is very fragile. Life is very fragile physically. In the blink of an eye, one who's alive can find themselves dead unexpectedly. And as we've experienced here at Grace this year, even brought back to life again. One can be walking down the sidewalk and all of a sudden fall, and a hip is broken, which alters and changes one's life. People move from mobility into immobility. Physically, life is fragile. Mentally, the line between mental illness and mental health is very slim. And finally, we move to emotionally, where anxiety and depression can throw us into the depths and into the darkness of the weeds. Speaking personally, I've known some of those dark shadows, some of those deep places in the woods where both anxiety and depression have grabbed hold of me. And if it were not for medication, as well as people walking alongside me, giving me counsel and encouragement, I don't know where I would be. But you see, God has given wisdom and insight, and we have support, and we have people to help in the midst of it. I bring this up on this day following the 1-year anniversary of Heather Heyer's death because we see a growing trend, an unfortunate trend happening amongst young people in our community and across the world of suicide. People who find themselves in the shadows. And in those shadows, the tendency is to want to isolate, to not be noticed, to not want to draw attention to oneself. And those become the darkest moments, and it's in those dark moments that we can lose perspective in the fragile nature of life and make a choice that we can never turn the clock back on. So I want to say to you today that there is help available in our community. And we should not think of ourselves as too big or too strong or too important to reach out and receive and call for the help that we need. But secondly, it calls us as people to have our eyes and our ears open to the people around us, the people who you notice the behavior is changing, or you pick up something as you're listening to those words, and God calls us to speak out, to reach out. I've asked Gloria to play a song that I found particularly helpful to me in the dark moments of my days. And it's a song which speaks some hope, and I invite you to listen to that at this time.
know it's all you've got to just be strong. And it's a fight just to keep it together. I know you think that you are too far gone, but hope is never lost. Hope is never lost. I know your heart is heavy from those nights, but just remember that you are a fighter, a fighter. You never know just what tomorrow holds, and you're stronger than you know, stronger than you know. Hold on, don't let go. Hold on, don't let go. Just take one step closer. Put one foot in front of the other. You'll get through this. Just follow the light in the darkness. You're gonna be okay. When the night is closing in, don't give up, don't give in. This won't last, it's not the end, it's not the end. When the night is closing in, don't give up, don't give in. This won't last, it's not the end, it's not the end. You're gonna be okay. Just take one step closer. Put one foot in front of the other. You'll get through this. Just follow the light in the darkness. You're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay.
Thank you, Gloria. Well, as surely as life is fragile, life is also a gift. There are no guarantees that we will see tomorrow, but we do have this moment in time. We have today. And whether or not we are traveling through the muck of life at this moment, in this season of our life, or whether we find ourselves on a high plane where life is going exceedingly well, either place, the reminder is that God is faithful. Now, some may say to me, and some have said to me, that, but I don't feel the presence of God. I feel as if God is not hearing me. Perhaps those thoughts have crossed your mind at times too. I remind us that God is not about a feeling, but rather it's about the promise that God is with us always, both in the muck, but certainly also on the high plane. Both in the times of our sadness as well as the times of our joy, the times of our struggle, as well as in the times when life seems to be going our way. So God calls us, as we've talked about many times, that we become the very hands and feet of Christ to those we encounter. For the surest way that people who are hiding in the shadows, who find themselves caught in the weeds of anxiety or depression, the way that we can be the hands and feet of Christ is because God works primarily through people. There's nothing more concrete about the love of God than when another human being reaches out and extends a hand, sends a text, makes a phone call, stops over to visit, and wants to reach out to those that are slipping away, seeking to isolate. When we enter the shadows with others, friends, You see, there we can give them the embrace of Christ with our own two arms. There we can extend a word of encouragement to them. And I want to say to you today that we all need from time to time, and quite frankly on a daily basis, a word of encouragement. Because encouragement means to be filled with courage, filled with life. When we give each other words of encouragement rather than just simply words of criticism, we build people up. We release life in them. And God is a life-giving God. Amen? God is a life-giving God. Christ says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He comes to give us life and to give it to us abundantly. And one of the significant ways we experience life is in the face and the touch and the words of another human being. You are filled with the light of Christ because Jesus said, you are the light of the world in Matthew 6. So may we bear that light to others. Let us pay attention with our two eyes and our two ears. And notice when people are slinking away, their behavior's changing. Their actions don't reflect the person you've known them to be. It should be to us a warning sign that somebody's in trouble. And if somebody is in trouble, I believe then God has sent us to be a signal of good news, of the love of Christ to other human beings. The craziness of suicide does not need to continue, but it does require people who will be noticers and people who will take action based on that because we dare to believe in the life of others. So to complete our story today from the book of Ruth, as we've read the final 4th chapter of Ruth, we discover that for Naomi, who changed her name to Mara, which means bitterness, the story flips here in the 4th chapter from despair to the devotion of Ruth and finally to descendants. I don't know if you caught it, but in the earlier chapters of Ruth, even though they were married for 10 years to these 2 Moabite women, there were no children, there were no descendants. So these 2 women headed back, Ruth and Naomi, back to the land of Bethlehem. For Ruth, this was her first time to Bethlehem. This was her first time to enter a foreign land. She was an outsider. Did you catch in today's reading? Even in the final pages of Ruth's book, she is still identified as Ruth the Moabite. And yet it is said of her, she was more significant to Naomi than 7 sons, huh? That's how important Ruth was. Even though she'd lost her 2 sons, it said of Ruth, she is more important to you, more faithful to you than 7 sons. What a blessing. Ruth the Moabitess. The significance is that God has extended God's mercy to all people, not just to the Jews, not just to Christians, but to all people in this story of Ruth. It's about God's incredible mercy and love for all people. And it's out of this conviction that every life matters, that we do pay attention, like Jesus paid attention to the people he encountered, people who were sick, people who were hurting. Because life is fragile and some people are greatly bleeding inside, hiding in the shadows of life. God calls us wherever we are, at our workplace, in our neighborhood, in our family. Just because somebody looks successful doesn't mean that they aren't crushed on the inside. You see, because depression and anxiety affect not just poor people, not just people of color. Rather, depression and anxiety, the fragileness of life touches all human beings, one way or another. So may we be a community that notices. Ruth recognized a truth. She said, Naomi, I'm going back. I'm going with you to Israel because we are stronger together. So she clung to her mother-in-law. She knew that as 2 widows, they would be stronger together than apart. We are stronger as church together than we are on our own. When we see people sliding into the weeds, pay attention, and may God give us the courage to reach out, to ask questions, to check in, to send a word of encouragement, to pray for, to take a hold of. other people. This is the way of God, because God is a God of life. And life is good. Even in the muck of life, life is still good. It's worth fighting for. It's worth holding on to. But it's also worth reaching out when we see ourselves in trouble and seeking the help that we need. It's okay to say, I am struggling. It's okay to say, I am feeling weak. I am feeling the need for somebody and something else so that I might be able to make it through this time. That's what Ruth and Naomi discovered. That's what I've discovered. That's what many of you have found as well. I've been overwhelmed over the last 2 services to notice the number of people that wanted to discover the name of the song that Gloria sang, wanted to come up and tell stories of their own times in places in the shadows. You see, it's part of life. We don't have to keep that a secret. It says we bring it out into the light, that there we find the hope and the encouragement of one another. So we give thanks to God today that, yes, Ruth the Moabitess was one who gave birth, and who finally gave birth. 3 lines down was the great-grandmother of King David. And David, as you know, is in the same line as Jesus. So Ruth the Moabitess was in the family tree of Jesus. And no, she was not the skeleton in the closet in Jesus' family. She was better to her mother-in-law than 7 sons. Could it ever be said of us, huh? What an incredible story. What an incredible woman. What an incredible encouragement to us to hold on, to press together. Because these widows could have given up. They could have split apart. They could have gone their own ways and struggled in life. But they knew together they were stronger, and we are stronger together, both as people and as people of faith. May God bless you this day as we journey together. May God use us to be people of encouragement to one another. And may we notice those to whom God places in our path, that we too might help to restore and strengthen life. This we pray, and this we say in the name of Christ our Lord. Amen.